Alrighty, so here is the problem, the first one that you sent me. Now this one is dealing with functions, and I'm just gonna explain as much as I can. So if I do go over stuff that you already know, I apologize for the redundancy. But basically, functions are going to be equations where you are given a a value in the equation, which that value is x. And how it works is that if you are given a number for x to equal, it gets plugged in here. So you'll see that number be h of whatever number it is equals blah, 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 blah. And what you do is basically you plug that number in wherever you see an x. And that is what we're going to do in this case as well. Now, the only different part about it is that we have two different functions. So in this case, if we're finding h over g of 2, that means 2 is going to be going in both spots for x because we are utilizing both functions. And specifically, we're utilizing both functions in a way that they are set up like a fraction. So basically, what that means is that you're going to take this top function, put that on the top line. It's going to look like 4 minus 3x squared. Well, just the handwriting is shitty. I'm like looking through it through the phone. But yeah, so the first one, which is on the top, is going to go on the top line. Excuse me. And then the bottom one, which is down here, is going to go on the bottom line. So that is 7 minus 9x. And we are doing this as a function of 2. So that means 2 is going to be plugged in both cases where x is. So how this is going to work is that we're going to have 4 minus 3, 2 squared over 7 minus 9 times 2. And we basically just solve all that out. So that means we have 4 minus 3. We want to do the exponent first. So that way, the order of operations and stuff like that. So 2 to the power of 2, which is just 2 times 2, is going to be 4. 2 times, essentially, yeah. And then that 7 minus 9 times 2, which is just 18. So then we have, let me see here, 4 minus, that is 12. 3 times 4 is 12. And down here we have 7 minus 18, which is, that would be negative 11, I think, is that? Yeah, off the top of my head, it's negative 11. And we want to make sure that we put that negative down here, because what's likely going to happen is we might end up with 2 negatives here. And I'll get to that when that happens. So we'll have that. And then 4 minus 12 is going to be negative 8. So that's negative 8 over negative 11. And now what happens here is that when you're working with a fraction and you have a negative on either the top or the bottom line, in this case both, you want to look at it like it's the number being multiplied by a negative 1. So if this represents a negative 1 and this represents a negative 1, that means these are going to be canceled out. So in the end, our solution is actually positive 8 over 11. And that is going to be the answer to that first one, which is basically just HG2 is equal to 8 over 11. So that's the first part of that question. The second one is kind of a trick question. Whenever a question asks you to find a value that is not in the domain of this function, that base of basically this function, that just means that what numbers, if I were to plug them into the function, would result in an impossibility or something that doesn't work mathematically speaking. And the only reason why a number wouldn't work in this situation is because it is a fraction. And if the bottom line ends up where the answer is 0, then that means that that cannot exist because you can't divide by 0. So in order to solve this, all we have to do is take the function on the bottom line, set that up like so, and then we're going to set this equal to 0. And this is what we're going to solve here. So in order to solve this, you would subtract 7 from both sides, and you'd end up with negative 9x equals negative 7. Then in order to solve that further, you want to divide by negative 9 to get the 9 off of that x, and you end up with negative 7 over negative 9. X is going to be equal to negative 7 over negative 9. But remember that because we are dealing with a fraction here and that both the top and the bottom line have a negative 1 in them, that they cancel each other out. So that means the final number is 7 over 9. And what that means is that if you take 7 over 9 and plug it into this function, then it's going to equal 0, and that you are going to run into a mathematical impossibility because you can't divide by 0. So that means your answer is going to be hg of x cannot equal 7 over 9. And in this case, that would be the only number here. Because let me think. Yeah, that would be the only number. It might, if it's gonna be finicky with you and give you crap, then it might say that it can't equal 7 over 9 or negative 7 over 9. I think that's right, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, because in that circumstance, that would be the case as well, because even if this number is negative, if you plug it into this equation, or actually, nope, I take that back. So that's the one thing you just want to check for. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so yeah, blah, blah, blah. X and what I just said earlier. This one definitely is an answer in the sense that it cannot be a part of this function. But before you send that answer in, you want to double check to make sure that the negative version of this number to see if it works or if it doesn't work. So in order to make sure that's the case, we just want to go 7 minus 9. And then for x, we just plug in negative 7 over 9. Because all we're doing here is just testing to see if this is going to result in 0. And if it does result in 0, then that means you can't use the negative version of this number as well, and that it's not in the domain as a function. If it ends up as any other number besides 0, though, then that means this can exist inside the function. So this would, let's see here. So that would cross itself out. That would be, let's see here, 7 minus 7. Now, same kind of what we talked about earlier, where you want to treat subtraction signs as their own negative ones. When you're subtracting from a negative number, that's going to cancel itself out. So that means that when this negative 1 gets multiplied by this negative 1, that actually becomes a plus. And your answer there is 14. And that just means that this number is okay to use in the function. So you do not need to put it in that function. You just want to do that whenever you're working with one of those, if it asks you the question of, can this not go in the function, if that makes any sense. So just kind of recap that. All we did was just take the negative version of that number, plug it in for the bottom line, because we know for a fact that the bottom line cannot be equal to 0. When you do that, those 9s cancel each other out. It's a subtraction sign, subtracting from a negative number, so the two negative ones cancel each other out, resulting in a plus instead. So you get 7 plus 7, which is equal to 14. 14 is not 0, so you're good to go there.